To install fonts on your computer. Now, most of these computers should have the same fonts installed on them, but a couple of them don't, and a couple people I had to help and show this. But I'll show you this for if you ever have your own computer and you want to install them on the Mac system. The Against the Clock fonts, if you go to their website and go to your student resource file, give it a second to load up. They have a set of fonts that you can download from there. We're using the CC titles, and these are all the open fonts, open type fonts that you'll download. When you download it, you'll get a zip file that looks like this. It says Reader Fonts, and when you unzip it, it'll give you this folder called the New ATC Fonts. All of these are the different fonts that we'll be using for the different projects. They say ATC, Against the Clock, and then the name of the font that you're working with. So if you ever try to find a font that's on your computer and it doesn't show up, what you need to do is to install it. Here's the easy way to do it. Mac makes it really, really simple. You can open the folder and you can select all of the fonts that are within it at the same time and double click. And this will open up a program called Font Book. You can see the name of it at the top. Font Book is simply Macintosh's font management software. When you do install font, it may take it a couple of seconds, but it'll quickly install all of them. If there's any problems, so in this case font validation came up, it says, hey, there may be a problem with this one. I know what the problem is. It's actually already installed on this font, and it's asking me, do I really want to reinstall it? But if there's no problems, then this won't come up and it should be okay. I'm not going to reinstall this font. Sometimes, especially if you go to shady free font websites, there will be like corrupted fonts that actually may harm your system. A lot of times, especially if your computer has a lot of fonts on it and you try to open up Photoshop or any of the Adobe software, it takes forever to load. What it's doing is it's having to go through and load up and link to all of these fonts. If you'll get rid of some of your unused fonts, it'll actually load up a lot quicker. But Font Book makes it really, really easy when you're on a Mac to be able to do that. So when you download them, you'll need to do that for all the different fonts that we have as well. Okay, so let's jump into Illustrator. Talk about, remember, this is the file that you're going to be saving as a PDF. When you go to File, you can do a Save As. Easiest way to do it is to change your format down here to PDF. And that'll give you the 3 different file types. I'll go ahead and do it to show you what importing looks like. Always remember where you save it to, or understand what folder it's in. I'm not going to worry about any of the options that come up for here. I'll just hit Save PDF, and we'll let that be on the desktop by itself. Illustrator is great because it allows you to create multiple artboards. Hey, Acrobat Pro automatically opened up. You can see, I'll come back to that. I'll show you what that means. In a lot of different vector drawing programs, you can really only work on one artboard, one piece of paper. In Photoshop, you can only work on one artboard at a time. If you want more, you have to open up multiple screens, multiple windows. In Illustrator, I can work in one document and have multiple different sizes of artboards. As a matter of fact, if you go to make a new document, you can tell it the number of artboards from the beginning. So if I needed 5 or 6 or however many different pages, I can give it the way I want it to lay out. In this case, it'll go left to right in a certain number of columns. We'll do it in 2-column structure. And of course, you give it your size that you need. So let's say I needed it 8.5 by 11. Whoops, not 8.5 by 1. Good letter size. When I say OK, this will automatically generate this number of artboards that I need to be able to work with. Another way you can create artboards and even change them up is to use your Artboard tool. Artboard tool is towards the bottom of your toolbox. With it selected, you can now see that my artboards are highlighted and I can click on them. I can move them around. There's nothing special about the placement of them. Really, it's the name and the order that you create them. But you can move around your artboards. You can click on the little bounding box and rechange the size of it. You can't change the rotation of it, but you can change the dimensions, height and width of it. So you can have multiple different sizes. And if I wanted to make a new artboard, say I wanted one down here, I can click and drag and create one quickly and easily that way. Here's the thing to pay attention to, is the order that you create them. You see the name of it? There's artboard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. And if I create more, you can see it'll name it as well. That's the order that if I was to print these, it would print in. So regardless where they're at, I can move them around like this. It'll still print page 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. I opened up a PDF when I saved this as a PDF document. You can see my PDF has it. This is page 1. If I scroll down, there's page 2 and page 3 on there. And so when you save PDFs, it'll save it as separate pages by themselves, not one large artboard. But let's jump back in here. A few more things to know about creating and customizing your artboard. You can look at the top. You've got your artboard options up here. If you've got one selected, you can quickly change the size of it. If I need this to be a tabloid size, I can choose a predefined size and it'll automatically set it. Change my landscape or portrait orientation. I can even give my artboard a new name. That's one thing that you'll need to do when you create your different logos. It's going to ask you to rename the artboard, and this is where we're able to do it. So I can call this, logo 1, whatever from there. You can give it specific placements and also specific height and width dimensions. So if I needed this one to be exactly 4 inches by 4 inches, I can type it in and recreate it and then drag it where it needs to be. Artboards do come in handy, especially if I'm trying to create entire logo systems or if I'm trying to tile a poster. If I can't fit a huge poster on a big piece of paper, I can put it on several small pieces of paper. And I can do that by creating a series of several different artboards to work with. Here's the final thing to know about making an artboard and especially copying it. I'm going to copy over my logo that I created. We'll select this one, copy, and this is what we're pasting it into. If you've got artwork on an artboard and you needed to quickly copy this artwork, I actually want to make it a version of it on another artboard. I'm going to choose my tool again. Pay attention to this icon. With that icon selected, that's your move and copy artwork with artboard. I can hold down my Option key. I get a double arrow, and when I click and drag, it'll not only copy the artboard, but whatever artwork is on it as well. Option, click and drag, and there it is right there. If I don't have this turned on and selected, and I hold down my Option key, it will copy the size of my artboard, but it won't pick up anything that's on that artboard as well. So this is a very important little icon to have selected or unselected. And it's a great way of quickly changing up and copying your work. Notice when I choose another tool, it goes back into normal working mode, and I can work from there. Pretty cool? Any questions on creating that? Awesome. So I'm going to move on. Here's the second thing to know. I won't even save what I'm working with. When you create your stationery, it's going to ask you to turn on what's called your bleed settings. And bleed is very important when you send your artwork to a printer. Y'all look up on this. Most printers, especially if it's just a desktop grade kind of printer, when you send something to it, it's got to be able to pull the pull the paper through it. And so most printers always have this little white edge border around it. If you ever tried to send something to it as large as possible, there's still like 1/8 of an inch of paper showing. The reason why is because the machine has to grip onto the paper and be able to pull it through, slide it through. It can't print all the way to the edge. This is called your gripper width. And so different machines may have thicker lines or thinner lines, but there's always a little bit of setup to do that. As a graphic designer, a lot of times I'll design my artwork around this gripper width so I can send it to any printer, and it's nice and cheap. It's an easy way of doing it. But what do I do if I want to do something like this? I want to be able to print all the way to the edge. When I have artwork going off to the edge to the side. There's no printer in the world that can print automatically to the edge of a piece of paper. It has to have that mechanical process of grabbing the paper, and that machine will get in the way of doing it. So how do they do this? They do this by actually printing your artwork on a larger sheet of paper and then trimming off the excess of it. Pretty cool? So this was probably, even though this is 8.5 by 11, was probably printed on a sheet of paper that was probably 13 inches wide and instead of 8.5, maybe 10 inches tall. And then they trimmed off the excess of it and gave you a perfect edges. The bleed edge, the red that you're seeing there, that it gives you a boundary for where to set your artwork to bleed off the edge, to be trimmed once it's cut. So if you look at the little leaves down at the bottom, If I was to send this to a printer, you can see these leaves are off my artboard. I'll zoom in so we can see it. They're off my artboard, but they're touching that red edge. That red is my bleed edge. Most printers, the bleed edge is about 1/8 of an inch wider than your actual paper that you want it to be. 1/8 of an inch is just kind of a common setting. I've rarely had to have it any larger. When you go to make a new document, here's how to set up your bleed edge. File and new. Of course, you can choose the number of artboards that you want. Down here at the bottom, this is what bleed means. I've got my link turned on, so when I input, there's 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. It automatically puts it in everybody else's. You can increase it or decrease it as necessary, but I'm going to keep it 1/8 of an inch. When I say OK, you can see now the red edge is around all the artboards that I created. By default, you'll always have the same bleed edge for any new artboard that you create. Even if I make a new one, there should be a new bleed edge that shows up for that as well. We'll go back and place it onto here. If I was to send this to a printer, I'll show you this. This will come in handy when we actually do print off something. I always send my file as a PDF. Let me show you one of the settings on a PDF. To turn on, there it is. Turn on your printer's marks. If you look over on the left-hand side, marks and bleeds, this is where I can turn on and show my printer where my trim marks should go. Other little thing like registration and color bars for this won't matter. But I will use my document bleed settings. Here's what the PDF will look like to a printer once they get it set up, once it decides to save. Aha, there we go. Here's my Cafe Lemon. These little lines here, it'll be printed off. These are little registration marks that let me know if I had to print it multiple colors to register the colors. But these lines here are my crop marks, and it allows me to crop off the edge of it. Here's my bleed marks. There it is. You see how this is overlapping about 1/8 of an inch? That's because I set up my bleed edge for setting it up. Very, very important thing to do. It's a small detail, but it's the kind of thing that if you send it to the printer and they say, hey, you need to turn on your bleed, that's what they're talking about. And it's up to you as the designer to do it. The printer will not do it for you. All right, so we've placed it in there. We've created something. Last thing I want to show you is to talk about placing artwork. We've put pictures in here before, and you can always go to File and Place. There it is, File and Place. And if you choose a JPEG, JPEGs are really, really simple. You know, like the lemon, you can place it as a template or you can link to it. But if you choose something that's got multiple pages to it, now when we saved our logo, it had 3 pages, and that was to the desktop. Something like a PDF, when you choose Place, I'm going to show the import options. And this will allow me to choose which version of the logo that I want to place within my document. On page 1, it gives me the full color. Page 2 gives me the little 2 color. And then maybe I wanted just the 1 color for page 3. You can automatically crop it. I didn't turn on any type of cropping, so we won't worry about that. But when I say OK, it'll import it. Notice that it's following around my cursor. It's actually asking me where do I want to place it. If I just click once, it'll automatically place it and put it into here. And I can treat it like a regular image once it's placed inside of here. It will ask you to scale down your logo. When you do this, remember to hold down your Shift key, and that will constrain the proportions. If I don't hold down my Shift key, I'm liable to do something that looks like this. And it's going to get too stretched or too squashed. Holding down your Shift key will keep the height and width proportional with each other as I scale it. Just make sure you let go of your mouse before you let go of the Shift key, else that'll happen. And that's a common problem that comes up as well. Pretty cool. Any questions or any issues that people have run into just yet before I let you go? I'll give you the rest of this time to be able to finish up this project and the other ones. Remember, you got till midnight to be able to turn everything in.